In the deep dark, the Aslan are moving, but there is a darker power. There is something behind the claw.
Welcome to episode 29 of the Behind the Claw podcast, a show for fans of the classic Traveller RPG. I'm Felbrigg Napoleon Herriot. Let's dive into the first segment. I have no idea, so computer, what can you tell me about this place? This is the My Galaxy segment, where I tell you about a planet in the Foraina subsector. A map and planetary UPPs for the subsector are available on the podcast's website at behindtheclaw.blogspot.co.uk. Apurdad has been declared an amber system by the Imperial Scouting Service due to the fractured and arbitrary nature of many of the governing bodies. No central government exists, and each of the continents has its own government that claims independence and sovereignty. Many of the countries have laid claims to the various bodies in the system. These claims cover not only the unsettled planets and moons, but even lay claim to various sectors of space itself around the bodies and above their countries. There are claims and counterclaims, and although the system does not have facilities to build its own starships, the various governments have imported enough of them that each has a fleet of anywhere between 5 and 500 ships, including a lot of standard design system defence boats. Those planning on visiting or trading with Apurdad will find themselves deemed suspicious by any authority until they've been confirmed as friendly. Even should one nation accept the visitor's presence, that does not mean that travel through the system will be unmolested, as the rival governments are very protective of their claims within the system. There have been a number of small-scale wars and border skirmishes in recent history, and this is the reason for the amber warning to travellers. Visitors to Apurdad will need masks to aid in breathing. They should wrap up warm as the world is cold, and should leave any weapons on their ships. There is no central trade body to deal with when you arrive, and traders will need to make their own contacts and contracts. They should also be aware that trading with one country is likely to prohibit trade with any others due to the petty jealousy between the authorities. The space-side starport can provide unrefined fuel, and travellers should avail themselves of this, as the local gas giant and the oceans of Apurdad itself are jealously guarded. The people of Apurdad have a lively and friendly culture that is welcoming to strangers, a dictate from their common religion. However, those people living along the many and various borders can be prone to be less welcoming due to the high state of tension. The gravity of the planet is lower than standard, and this has led to the population being quite tall, and this is a desirable feature amongst the population. Height effectively translates to beauty amongst these inhabitants. Traders with a greater height are likely to make better deals and be especially welcomed. One thing to be avoided while visiting the planet is singing. It is not culturally acceptable. It is considered base and low, and anyone singing could find themselves shunned. They are not without music, however. String instruments are especially favoured.
No way. The way I heard it is that he was shipping arms, guns, taking them straight in, under the Navi's nose.
It's time for another story seed. Heiser Matano is a very rich man. He is the director of 3 megacorps that span at least 20 subsectors and have fingers in practically every pie. He has owned a number of star systems for decades, but in the last 5 years, he has bought a new system and has started work on a project that will outlast him and, as he hopes, will create a monument to his memory that will last for centuries. He's brought the huge, unsettled system of Guella 4, a system notable for its 3 vast meteor belts. Further in, the system has a number of average-sized worlds that the Sun has stripped of atmosphere. The only world with atmosphere is a single hydrogen giant. Heiser's plan is to render down the entire system to create a vast ring-shaped habitation that orbits the Sun. His plans show a tube with a 100-metre diameter stretching right around the Sun. The plans predict that the construction will only take about 100 years, and will entirely use the vast amount of material in all of the worlds, moons and asteroid belts of the system. Heiser has constructed one standard habitat in orbit of the Sun, and from this vast industrial station, a vast and still growing army of robotic automatons are collecting material from the system and processing it to build the tubing which is slowly extruding from the side of the station. But Mr. Matano has problems. For instance, spacers are skimming hydrogen from his planet, fuel that he needs to power his building operations. His massive financial institutions have board members who don't wish to see the funds spent on this project. And on the station itself, there's been sabotage. Serious industrial problems have been induced by persons unknown, and now Heiser needs some outsiders he can trust to investigate these so-called accidents. The PCs come into this vast robotic enterprise as new employees, working undercover, trying to find out who or what is sabotaging the project. As the PCs start work, you have 100 opportunities to play with them. Are the accidents down to faulty machinery? There could be the emergence of a robotic AI. There could be actual industrial sabotage, or perhaps another megacore that wants to exploit this system. The Guela star system is fairly remote, so it's entirely possible that a political movement with philosophical objections has arisen amongst the workforce. Can the PCs infiltrate this new semi-religion and discover who the leaders are? Perhaps to arrest those leaders? Or perhaps more interesting, can they be turned? Or the movement itself be turned from being against the project to being for it? You might have an interesting twist by having Heiser's own son or daughter be against the huge waste that the project entails. They might be upset that their inheritance is being frittered away. Another alternative would be for one of the planets in the system to be harbouring a new intelligent life form, and either they or their proxies are causing the problems, as they don't want to die when their entire homeworld is turned into building materials.
No, sir, you may not dock here.
What the hell? I just made 3 jumps to get here.
Without permit 7C, you may not dock. Now move out to the holding line at 6,000 kilometres.
This is the Rules Talk section, where I look at some aspect of the classic Traveller rules or canon. And today, I'm taking a glance at the Carousing skill. Interestingly, neither of the 77 nor the 81 core rulebooks mention it at all. It first appears in the 1979 version of Highguard, suggesting Carousing is primarily a space-going skill. This seems backed up because it also appears in the book for Scouts and Merchant Prince. Here's the official description. Carousing. The individual is a gregarious and sociable individual, well adapted to meeting and mingling with strangers in unfamiliar surroundings. It goes on to suggest that it can be used in 2 ways, as a +1 dice modifier on patron encounters, and also usable when hiring, but it doesn't give you any dice modifiers for that. The book for Merchant Prince expands on that a little, going so far as to say that Carousing can be used as 1 level lower for standard Steward skills. So if you have Carousing 2, that gives you Steward 1. Or if you've got Steward 1, that gives you Steward 0, which even as a 0 level skill is a huge boon when stewarding, as it avoids the unskilled -2 penalty. I also took a peek into some of the adventures, trying to see anything else referring to the Carousing skill. In Adventure 6, Expedition to Zidane, it says Carousing can be used to entertain when trying to win a contract. This suggests that the ability to mingle well has a wider usage than the limited suggestion from the core rulebook. It also goes on to suggest that it can be used in a salesman's role too. I think that the usage of this skill is much wider than the suggestions in the core rulebook. It appears in every instance to be sort of a social lubricant for getting what you want out of a situation. So any character with this skill could take on the role of a face man. This speaks to me like a character who leaves the service with Vac-Suit 1, leaving with only Carousing 1 instead, could still be a life-changing skill. It could get you a career. With Carousing 1 even, You are able to take the lead in every social situation, be that a business negotiation or wheedling facts out of a contact. This could be huge. It's the difference between a +1 DM and the -2 for unskilled use. I also note that the skill gets a couple of passing references in some of the alien modules, but tends to be culturally specific and of less use with other races. So all in all, this is a coolly versatile skill, and should appear prominently in die rolls when it's available.
Did you hear that? What the hell do you think it is? Is it dangerous?
This is the Creature Catalogue, where I take a look at a creature from somewhere in the Imperium. It was only a few years after Vanuk was colonised that the first stone lizard was discovered. One of the colonist engineers was climbing a mountain that bordered the new settlement and prospecting for a site to mount a transponder when he came across the stone lizard. At first, the colony scientists were utterly confused by the find, and the engineer was even accused of presenting them with a hoax. There was no record of the planet ever having been colonised, but here was the engineer presenting a statue he claimed to have discovered. From the top of its nose to the tip of its tail, it measured 4 feet 6 inches. Thin of body, thick of tail, the quadrupedic statue appeared to be made of a grey stone. The engineer had found it on the side of the mountain, next to a very old lava flow. The scientists could only believe that it was either a hoax, had been left by an unknown human explorer, or possibly even by alien visitors. That was it, an anomaly. But then more were found. Another was found over 100 miles away, close to a geothermic pool. Then more were found on another continent. Scientific interest blossomed, and a group was established to look into the mysterious stone lizard statues. It was when they were trying to determine the nature of the material that made up the statue that they placed one inside a furnace in an attempt to establish its melting temperature that the strangest discovery was made. The stone lizard started to move. When heated far above the planet's natural ambient temperature, the stone lizard simply came to life. It was an astounding discovery, and off-world scientific interest demanded samples for study. Still, no one had any idea where they came from, until a science party studying a volcano found the natural habitat of the lizard. Inside the active lava pits, the lizards were spotted swimming in the lava and climbing around the walls close to it. Anywhere that the superheated air travelled, so did the lizards. It was quickly established that the lizards themselves froze into a stone-like state when removed from their natural habitat. In their natural habitat, they would lay eggs in underground lava reservoirs and subsisted on a number of minerals that the extreme heat of the environment allowed them to process as food. The lava lizard was an unprecedented discovery and quickly received a protected status from both the colony government and the Imperial Scout Service. Yet, despite the protected status, there is still an active and well-funded off-world demand for exports of the animals, with well-funded and organised poaching parties often jumping into the system, raiding a known habitat, and jumping away again before authorities can respond.
So I'm here. Why don't you tell me why you called?
The spacer in the corner booth. Don't stare at him.
I see him. Who is he?
It's the guy on the news vids.
Which news vids? There are thousands of channels.
Crookwatch.
Ah, I see.
This is the People of Interest segment, where I tell you about someone from the Imperium that's got a bit of a reputation. Leon Gressler was a very successful author. His books were published on 5 worlds and turned into a very successful video series. This left him independent and wealthy. As well as writing books, he became politically active, and very publicly took an anti-war, anti-conflict position. The established powers painted him to be a minor distraction and generally ignored him. After initial interest by the media, his rants and proclamations slowly disappeared off the scene. In the last 3 years before he disappeared, he published a paper predicting the end of his homeworld in a war that used biological weapons. This received a blip of media interest, but mostly for the purposes of ridiculing him. And after that, he kind of disappeared from news and media altogether. His proposal, however, laid out a timeline of events that did seem entirely possible, if not likely. Some elements of his thesis were even used in military disaster response planning. Later investigation proved that during this period, he spent a considerable amount on the construction of a bunker. The plans for the bunker were discovered after his disappearance, but the final location of it were kept a secret. His disappearance itself went unnoticed for a week or two, until friends of the family noticed that his wife and children were not turning up when expected. The police investigated and discovered details of the bunker, but, as I said, not its location. A note saying goodbye was found, and it explained that he fully expected that he and his family would be the only survivors of the upcoming war. Only that war never happened, and Leon has never been seen since. 20 years later, a young woman called Jonah, claiming to be Leon's granddaughter, was found wandering in the wilds. She was half-starved and confused, and the tale she told was as weird as it could be. Her claim was that she had escaped her grandfather's bunker after it was invaded by the Spider People. That indeed these aliens had in fact killed the rest of the bunker's inhabitants, including her entire family and their servants. She couldn't lead the investigators back to the bunker, but they did manage to find it by backtracking her path. The bunker itself was a burned-out wreck, but showed evidence of having been fully stocked with the machinery of life support and goods for the intervening years since Leon's disappearance. Jonah's stories of an alien invasion of the bunker was at first discounted as the ramblings of a disordered mind, but the police investigation did recover xenomaterial from the bunker, materials that were patently from living organisms but unknown in the Imperial catalogues. Her stories of portals opening and hordes of Spider-Men seemed very unlikely to the authorities, but there was no evidence of any crimes, as there were no bodies left in the bunker. Jonah inherited the estate of her grandfather and lives in luxury, but does remain under a legal psychological observation.
Thanks for the trade, Tuchel. It was a pleasure doing business with you. So long, sucker.
So once again, we've reached the end game. And as usual, if you have thoughts, suggestions, questions, or segment items or stories, please send them into behindtheclaw@outlook.com. This podcast is released on an attribution non-commercial no derivatives license. Its home on the web is at behindtheclaw.blogspot.co.uk. Music by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. I'm your host, Felbrig Napoleon Herriot. Thanks for listening. Prepare for jump.